On October 1st, 2011, Scott Young asked himself a question that would change his life forever. What if he tried to learn the entire 4-year computer science curriculum from MIT in just one with only $2,000? He already had a business degree, but after 4 years of college and tens of thousands of dollars in student debt, a business degree is more about procrastinating on making a business than actually making one. So he decided to get a computer science degree, but lacked the money and time to return to college. Then he discovered that MIT posted its entire computer science curriculum online for free. He was intrigued, but his friends and family said he was insane, arrogant, or a mix of both. Nonetheless, 12 months later, on September 26, 2012, he completed his challenge. This begs the question, how did he do it? The answer lies in his secret weapon: meta-learning. Meta-learning means learning about learning. It involves seeing how a subject works, how experts in the past have tried to learn it, and what specific motivations you have that you can tailor your learning experience to you. With meta-learning, you can learn things faster and more effectively while avoiding common learning traps. To really understand how powerful this is, let's use an analogy. Imagine that every learner who embarks on a learning endeavor enters the learning ocean, a vast expanse begging for adventure. Most ships get hired by Captain School, an old sailor who means well but has long since passed his glory days. Even though everyone is going to different spots in the learning ocean, Captain School gives them the same supplies, directions, and no map. Going back to real life, school often doesn't have the resources, time, or knowledge to personalize learning to us. Obviously, this is a problem, and for our analogy, results in many people ending up in parts of the learning ocean they don't want to be in, like the troll island of frustration. Dang, someone has not had their morning coffee. In school, hitting islands like this is tantamount to learning things that we don't need to in real life ineffectively because of following bad meta-learning principles. The solution is in doing what Scott Young did for his MIT challenge, creating a meta-learning map. A meta-learning map is a bird's eye view of your learning endeavor, why you want to embark on it, the gaps that you need to uncover in your learning, the resources that you can use, a strategy for how you'll implement it, and finally, intention to tweak it as you go along. And I summarize the process of creating this map in Q.U.E.S.T, which is a framework that stands for question your goal, uncover gaps, explore resources, strategize backwards, and tackle and tweak. This is the 5-step process I go through for every learning endeavor. And I like to call it Quest because it makes me feel like I'm embarking on some epic quest for a game, which is what we're going to be exploring in this video. If you can use a meta-learning map, you can avoid most of the dangers of navigating the learning ocean, like the troll island of frustration. And this is how Scott Young did the MIT challenge in such a shorter amount of time. Before starting, he created a map of how he would learn the curriculum, the practice problems, free online lectures, and he set rules for himself. He planned out how he was going to learn everything, how he would structure his days and his weeks to do the challenge. So through creating this map and other learning principles, Scott completed a curriculum which should have taken him 4 years in one. So let's learn how to do epic things like that by learning how to use Q.U.E.S.T ourselves, using one of my own learning endeavors as an example, which is how to incorporate periodization into my resistance training and dieting at the gym. So the first step is Q for question your goal. You can think of this step as identifying why you're doing the learning endeavor you want to. So you define what you want to learn concretely and connect it to something that you already care about, similar to choosing your quest in a game. So let's start by defining what periodization is. It's a fitness system created by Dr. Mike Israetel, which involves the systematic organizing and planning of your resistance training into cycles, which include microcycles, mesocycles, and macrocycles that all have distinct goals, training methodologies, and involve periods of cutting, maintaining, and bulking through diet. Now, you don't have to know these jargon terms unless you want to get into the gym yourself, but it's good to have a general idea of what it is as we go through do the learning endeavor with Q.U.E.S.T. So why do I want to learn how to do it? Well, for the last year, I've been stagnating in the gym. I went into my calendar for a year ago while I was on a call with my brother, and I realized I was doing the same weight on incline dumbbells as I was a year before, which was not fun. So I decided to try this out and see if it helps me start increasing again, because I'm past my beginner gains phase. Also, it's gonna be fun to experiment with a new training technique. I've been using the same one for a while, and it will be cool to do something new. And it'll also make me look more attractive and physically fit. Yeah, I'm only human. Another part of Q is asking whether this is an intrinsic or an instrumental learning project. Instrumental learning projects are those you're learning with the purpose of doing something predominantly for extrinsic reward. So for example, learning a new coding language so you can put it on your portfolio for job applications. And intrinsic learning projects are ones that you pursue more for your own sake. So for example, I'm learning Spanish just for fun because I want to be able to speak Spanish when I travel there for funsies in the future. Usually there's both extrinsic and intrinsic reasons to do something, but there's often a predominant one. And the reason it's important to differentiate is if you're doing an instrumental learning project, it's a really good idea to contact an expert and talk to them, or at least look at how they have learned the thing and what it's like beforehand, because that can really give you an idea of what should you avoid and not avoid for when you're learning this thing. Like for example, if you want to become a doctor, talk to some doctors before you try and become one. Like see what the general day-to-day life of a doctor is like, because my bet is it's way different than what you think it is. And if Scott Young had done this at the beginning of his business degree, he might have realized he shouldn't do a business degree and not wasted all the moolah on doing it instead. Reaching out and setting up a meeting is way less complicated than it sounds. Many people, particularly the introverts among us, shy away from it because they recoil like a scared turtle at the idea of cold emailing someone. But it's less hard than you think. Most experts are willing to help if you just reach out with a really short, concise email. I get nice emails from my audience all the time. And the important thing is to be concise, right? Write a simple, to the point email mentioning who you are, why you want to contact them, and ask for no more than 15 minutes of their time through email or video call. And even if your learning endeavor is intrinsic, it might still be a good idea to do this so that you avoid pitfalls of the thing that you're learning. Next is uncover gaps, which you can think of as the what of your learning. This is where you identify knowledge, skills, routines, habits, facts, environments, or tools that you might need for your learning endeavor. And it doesn't matter if your outline isn't perfect for the step, because you can always come back and change it in the tackle and tweet step as you go. So knowledge gaps can either be conceptual or factual. Concepts are ideas that you need to really understand in order to implement them. Like chemistry and math, for example, they're both subjects that lean heavily towards concepts, whereas some subjects straddle the concept-fact divide, like psychology, which has facts about human biases that must be memorized, as well as principles that must be understood. And in general, if something needs to be understood and not memorized, you can put it into the concepts column. Facts are anything you need to memorize, right? They don't need to be understood as long as you know them. Languages, for example, huge amount of facts pretty much on vocabulary, punctuation, and to a lesser extent, grammar. So for my learning endeavor, my learning gaps looked like, for concepts, periodization, maintenance, bulking and cutting, and macros. For facts, niche fitness terminology like MVP, RIR, deloads, and more. For skills, discipline. Yes, it's actually a skill, especially for a learning endeavor that involves so much physical and mental effort. And finally, for routines, just regular gym time. So once you've written down all your learning gaps, you can underline the ones that seem like they're going to be the most challenging, so you can keep them in mind while exploring resources in the next step. So for example, you might notice discipline is one of the things that I wrote down. So I'll have to look at this in my exploring resources section. I sometimes do struggle with not taking that one spoonful of peanut butter that I should not. So I'm definitely gonna need to look at some discipline resources in the explore part. Explore resources, you can think of as not just this step, but the next three as the how of learning. This step, you gather resources, tools, and allies for your journey, which mirrors the collection of gear formation and alliances in preparation motivation for a quest. According to Scott Young's 2019 book, Ultra Learning, there's two methods that you can use to do this. First is benchmarking, and then next is emphasizing and excluding. So in benchmarking, we explore the already established ways to learn something, and we can do them ourselves. So examples could be from universities like Harvard, MIT, Cornell, or other experts that have documented their learning journeys. So for example, while exploring my resources for periodization, I found tons of free videos online from like Dr. Mike Isertel, as well as his book, Scientific Principles for Hypertrophy Training. And I also found a lot of resources on how to maintain, bulk, cut, and build the skill of discipline from people like Jeff Nippard and Atlee and X. And then once you've benchmarked, you can begin emphasizing and excluding stuff, which involves emphasizing or excluding parts of your benchmark based on your goals. So for example, I emphasized the stuff about periodization because that's what I was trying to learn. And I de-emphasized all the stuff that I already knew about the gym, like very beginner stuff, like how to do different form for different exercises. Another question is, how much planning do you do in this stuff? It's a tough question because planning might allow you to learn vastly more effectively by avoiding material that you don't need to and also learning more effectively, but it also can become a procrastination technique in itself. We all know or have been that person who said, I'm going to change my life tomorrow. So it's impossible to tell how long you should plan for, but generally the longer the learning project you're doing, the longer that you should actually take in the planning step. So in S for Strategize Backwards, this is a step where you actually concretely define how you're going to embark on your learning endeavor by setting higher order goals and then reverse setting goals down to individual tasks and daily routines. So I recommend you plan your path to the end goal by starting at the final objective and then working backward. And this is called reverse goal setting. And it makes it more likely that the steps you take towards your goal will actually make you reach there. And there's so much research on how to do goal setting, like SMART goals, not setting goals at all. So take what I'm gonna say next with a grain of salt, do what works for you. But my favorite goal setting method comes from Ali Abdaal's book, Feel Good Productivity, called NICE goals. Isn't that nice? And the way that it works is NICE goals are near term, next weeks or months. They're input based, which means they are emphasize the process of getting to a goal rather than the outcome. They're controllable, which means you can influence them. And they're energizing, which means you get excited thinking about them. So for my periodization learning endeavor, my main NICE goals were complete my first macro cycle and assess how it feels. And to do this, I would spend an hour or more a day over the next 2 weeks when I started the challenge, going through my resources and implementing them into the regular times I was already going to the gym. And I wanted to do that in this order. First, I was gonna look at Dr. Mike Isertel's free videos on periodization online. Then I was gonna go through the book, Scientific Principles of Hypertrophy Training. Then the videos from Jeff Nippard, Dr. Mike, and Atlee and X on discipline, maintaining, bulking, and cutting. And finally, I was gonna write a blog post after 2 weeks summarizing my learnings about periodization and potentially a video. And then the last step of Quest is tackle and tweak, which is where you embark on your learning quest, ready to face challenges, and you adapt your strategies as needed. So this step kind of represents the action phase where you actually gung-ho into the learning ocean and you apply what you've planned and adjust based on feedback and results. I want to emphasize that the real benefits of meta learning don't show themselves in the first learning endeavor you go down. As you embark on more and more learning quests, your meta learning skill increases as well. You learn more about your motivation, how to manage your time, your capacities, and more. And ultimately, the beauty comes not in any individual learning project, but the projects as a whole. You start believing in yourself. Your mind literally opens up. You realize you don't have to go to school and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to learn something. You can learn it on your own. And of course, this is not the same thing as getting a certificate proving you've learned, although I would argue you often haven't when you get a certificate, like from a university or a program, but it is learning nonetheless. So like Scott Young with the MIT Challenge, realize the world is your oyster. Now go out and learn something that you never believed that you could. So what is your next learning endeavor gonna be? If you really wanna kickstart your learning journey, I recommend you check out my free gamification resource, which goes in depth into the best resources I have on how we can get inspired from games to boost our learning, our productivity, and our creativity by creating a superhero alter ego, defining our quests, cultivating our skills, and fighting our bad guys. As always, have a fantastic rest of your day, eat some peanut butter, and bye-bye.